educate both legislative bodies about what is involved in the sales and use tax collection. This is not as simple as saying, oh, property tax is a lot easier to administer, frankly. You have entire systems that do that already. You don't actually collect sales and use tax yourselves, and you don't actually have systems in place to administer the audits, et
We
cetera.
don't even have a Board of Equalization office in this county anymore, which we used to.
So we were retained to take a look at sales and use tax specifically, to take a look at the greater Ukiah Valley area. We have not determined a physical geographic boundary. There was one discussed apparently a couple of years ago. We started with that, but then we looked at how complicated it would be to follow that pattern from a couple of years ago and how hard it would be to administer. And in fact, our recommendation has been to change some of that, and there are several considerations which are all outlined at the end of your memo that need to be thought about if we were to move forward. And the reason that the two bodies started with, I think, sales and use tax was it had been discussed with both parties prior to them coming aboard, and there had been some traction on that prior, and there is a consideration that either big box retail or other retail dollars, there's no sales leakage, and that there's no competition between the two parties for those, so that you reduce that competition. That's essentially what a sales and use tax agreement can be used for. And the other questions that you have, I guess Tom could actually address.
Thank you. And I think I'm in agreement with all of the different discussions that Zarka has mentioned. And when initially going back to that agreement that I saw that your board had previously seen, there was some mention of the 1995 General Plan Sphere of Influence for the City of Ukiah, which has or has not been adopted. I had made a proposal earlier to do it based on the State Street corridor as a different way to create some thought processes. But Zarka is correct. One of the most difficult things, as we've come to see through the research, is how we take and extract the data and determine what we're going to define as the geographic boundaries. What we are only talking about is a sales and use tax agreement, the 1% property tax transfer fee, property taxes, all those are issues relating to annexation. What we're talking about here is purely a revenue sharing agreement between the City of Ukiah and Mendocino County regarding sales and use tax. But how you define that geographic boundary, for instance, if you pick zip code 95482, which is the general geographic area, it has quite a spread where it takes off and goes into the foothills, but there's not a lot of tax generation that happens in those areas, so it's really not that important. But buried within the 95482 zip code area, there's a little island that sits out there that's a zip code for Talmadge. And you have to decide whether or not you want Talmadge with this little tiny post office box. 95482 physically goes up through Calpella, but there are businesses who use post office boxes different than a situs address. So it's, as you work through the numbers, you can spend more staff time generating the breakdown than you probably are going to realize between the two parties. And when we talk, also I should mention, when we talk about sales tax sharing, we're not talking about changing anything in the current agreements. So everything that's been discussed would be from this point forward. So whatever the county's sales taxes have been up to this point in time, it would continue to enjoy. But if the board made a decision that you wanted to implement this agreement January 1st, which is really the critical date for us, because as you try and massage all of this data and get the numbers out, it's really best if it's done on a calendar year basis. That's why we've been pushing toward the January 1st date, that it's important to look at how sales tax is generated and what geographical area you define. So I think we're at that point where we need some direction from the board. It's a sales tax sharing agreement. It's based upon everybody keeps what they have up to this point in time, and if we were successful and the board adopted us moving forward this in the city council, we would say that as of January 1st, 2009, we, on some percentage basis, would split any future growth in sales tax. And part of our sort of our operating principles that we're working here with is we're trying to get rid of the fiscalization of land use policies. So when you have these type of agreements, they tend to eliminate the competition between the two regions, and then the different government agencies actually start making land use decisions that are appropriate for the future, not based on who's going to get the revenue, but on basis on good solid planning decisions.
Supervisor.
So if you start with a base figure, and probably any base figure that you use from this day backwards, at least for the next 2 years, probably is going to looks like it's going to be a figure that's that's higher of any number in the future. The way things are looking here, even including gas sales tax revenues. So if there's a negative increase, then there's nothing to split, right?
That's correct. We've worked out money would go into a pot of basically, but if you're negative in your growth, then there is no payment that goes toward this overall allocation.
And you mentioned like Cal Pal out there; they have their separate post office.